Okay, and then share screen. Okay, I'm also going to stand up because I have context dependent performance and I can't do it sitting down. So what I am going to present now is our recent preprint that I have written with Jill and Jackie, but also Louise Robson, who's on the chat from Sheffield, as well as Michael Seary from the University of Edinburgh, and Joanne Murray from the University of Glasgow, and Ciara Holland from the University of Glasgow. It's quite a large team. And this paper has now been out for a couple of weeks. It's had a very good reception. And the purpose of the paper is to try and provide a framework or some principles for looking ahead to September and the work we're going to have to do in terms of supporting an online pivot. This paper is linked to the cluster work in that its scope is broader. It's not specifically about widening participation, but we've written every part of it with our widening participation concerns in mind. So we thought it would be useful to present this paper because actually some of the questions that have come up about, you know, needing evidence to try and convince people, that's one of the reasons why we wrote this paper. So it is freely available as a preprint. We're going to submit it on Monday, the revised version. So hopefully that will be published, but you can access the preprint here if you want. So the first thing to say is probably that our 10 simple rules, we know that none of this is simple. Okay, like what's coming is going to be far from simple, but we do think that there are some kind of simple principles that can underlie what we're going to do, even if the implementation of it all is going to cause us a lot of sleepless nights. These are the 10 simple rules that we've come up with. Now, I'm not going to go over them all because of time and because you all have access to the paper. Instead, what I'm going to do is just pick out the ones that we think are most important for widening participation. And actually, there are things we have already touched on today in all of our other discussions. There was one comment that came up in the chat about rather than doing, you know, asynchronous lectures, why not do kind of this, you know, blended type of learning? And I think one thing I just really want to quickly touch on is that our rules are very much about what's coming isn't going to be perfect. And what's coming isn't online learning. We are not suddenly transforming our degrees from face-to-face to online in the same way that, you know, the Open University does. That some of this is going to be the best we can do, even if it's not perfect, taking into account expertise, workload, feasibility, and all that stuff, which underpins a lot of our suggestions. So anyway, we'll actually get to the point now, and I'm just going to go through the ones that I've noted in red here. And where are my slides? So our first recommendation, suggestion, rule, whatever you want to call it, is that we should be seeking to provide asynchronous content. And this is, we've said it before already, that we need to provide flexibility to our students. We need to be able to ensure that our students can engage with their studies regardless of their caring responsibilities or whether or not they're competing for a laptop or bandwidth or just a quiet environment to work in. Content that can be provided asynchronously should be. Our second rule is to provide synchronous and asynchronous contact and communication. So this isn't to say that you can't perform the lecture live and have that interaction, but just that it should then be recorded so that students can engage with it flexibly. In terms of kind of contact rather than communication, in terms of contact rather than content, it's important again to try and build flexibility into that for widening participation students, which is that provide multiple avenues of contact. WP students might find it more difficult to get onto Zoom on a laptop. Can they use email or a discussion forum or the phone even, you know, kind of think about the options that you are providing, and also be very clear on guidance and expectations on the purpose of each. Widening participation students always come in with less knowledge, not always, but a lot of them come in with less knowledge about what university is going to be like. the students who are least likely to have had experience of Zoom when they arrive in September will be WP students, okay? You know, the nice middle class family pub quizzes that are happening aren't going to be for everyone. So actually for some students, even what we're doing now is going to be completely new. One thing that's I've been thinking about in terms of my level 1 class is actually enforcing Zoom backgrounds. I quite like having people's faces because I feel like I'm lecturing into the abyss if I don't, but I'm very aware of what's in the background. Like, I've purposefully set up my laptop here so that it's in front of a bookcase, so I look like a terribly interesting person. I don't want my students to feel embarrassed about what's behind them. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to provide them with backgrounds and enforce that they use them, kind of like a school uniform, as, you know, that leveler of background. So I think there's things like that we need to think about when it comes to synchronous communication. We need to be very, very clear if we're going online about our expectations about engagement. Students need to engage. Online does not mean, you know, a lack of engagement. But online learning potentially comes with more issues about independent learning and, you know, how to study. And how to succeed online cannot be part of the hidden curriculum. If we want our students to engage in a certain way, we're going to have to be so explicit about what that means. They cannot be dependent on getting the right advice from their parents. We need to tell them everything, even if that feels like spoon feeding, like it's a pandemic, just spoon feed, you know. We need to be very, very clear. I'm aware I'm rushing through these. There is the full paper. I just want to get it for the discussion. The fourth bit, I can't remember, is to monitor and support engagement. We do need to be flexible. And I think anyone who's talking about penalizing failure to attend synchronous events needs we need to have a word with those people, because that's not fair. But that doesn't mean we can't monitor students. I'm currently trying to think about, you know, what is the criteria for engagement? If my students aren't, you know, engaging with at least 50% of the content, do I then follow them up? You know, just with a friendly message to say, are you okay? Is there anything wrong? Can I help with anything? And I think we're going to need to be really, really careful about just understanding what's happening in the classrooms, because we aren't going to have that face-to-face contact where you can look at a student and go, something's not right. We're going to need to have the data to try and pick that apart instead. And we know that help seeking, the students who need the most help are the ones who don't ask for it. So there's going to have to be that level of awareness that we have going forward. The final one possibly is, no, it's not, the penultimate one, is that we need to ensure that our resources are available, accessible, and signposted. I mean, this should be the case anyway, but we know that sometimes it's not. And I think this summer there's, you know, a lot of work going to have to be done, looking at the VLE, looking at the organisation, making sure that signposting is actually there. You know, little things like, is the reading actually available without going to the library physically? Is it available for free? And this is something I really have in my head. Increasingly, I kind of want to get rid of the traditional textbook, because I don't want them to have to pay for it at all. And I think there's alternatives out there. And particularly when they don't have the library to go to for that physical copy, you know, that's going to impact WP students more. Accessibility for disabled students, when it comes to lecture recordings, the issue of captioning is it's a bit of an issue, but you know, making sure things like your files can be read by a screen reader, for example, all those things, we're going to have to be just on top of it, because you can't have the case where you've got students at a distance who are unable to access the content. And I think one of the things that's also sometimes forgotten about is making sure that you signpost services that are running online. So things like, you know, the academic support from Leeds or CAD or whatever it's called in your institution, counselling services, and so on. They will be offering things online. It'll be different in different institutions, but all of those help and extra stuff, we need to make sure that they're aware of. And finally, again, it's just, I know it feels like spoon feeding, but it's not. Explain the VLE, do a welcome video, show them how to get around there, because they're not going to have the benefit of sitting next to their classmate going, what's that? Where do I find it? We're going to need to fill in those little interactions that they wouldn't have. And then finally, we need to make sure that we create a community for staff and students. My plan is to do daily updates and really focus on the social side of things for the first few weeks to try and build that community, because we know, and it's come out in the focus group study, that widening participation students already have problems with this sense of belonging and integration and the social aspects when they're on campus, and I think it's only going to be made worse when they're off. So really trying to think about creative ways to, you know, bring people in. Charlie's saying create your own backgrounds with photos. Yeah, one of the things we're thinking about is like a Zoom background competition, or, you know, like a meme competition, or just like something that everyone can get involved with. This is one of the reasons why I think we should not be spending our time completely rewriting lecture courses for 1 year. I would much rather that my staff just did their lectures the way they were last year, which might not be perfect, and they put every minute of that extra work this is going to take into the community and into the engagement and the support. And I think that's the most important thing. WP students don't have an up-to-date computer. This won't work, I'm afraid. I think there's a lot of conversations going on about, if there's an online pivot, what can we do for the students who still want to come to campus? And I think that's a really important thing, which is that even if courses are going fully online, can we allow students on campus to use technology on campus with social distancing in place? Anyway, I've massively rushed through that. So apologies if that was a bit breakneck. I tend to talk too fast anyway. Okay, so we're just gonna move on to the discussion points, I think, so we can talk about this in the breakout rooms, and then maybe just whoever has time, we can come together at the end for an extended chat. So this is the bit of the session where it might all go horribly wrong, but I've got faith. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be totally fine. What we would like is your feedback on the cluster output so far, and also where you think the gaps are in the resources. So hopefully you will have all seen the email that I sent around last night and a couple of days ago that pointed to the resources. So what we've produced as part of the cluster so far is there's the top tips leaflet, which is the sharing of best practice about lecture recording and widening participation, and that's kind of in a more general sense. We're also going to work on this database of resources and links. So there's been comments saying, you know, is there any evidence to back this up and stuff? We're going to try and put that all in one place, so it's really, really easy to find, and we're still working on that. Jill's been developing a resource for schools, which is a video, what does university teaching look like? And hopefully a few of you have had the opportunity to have a little look at what we've done so far. But the idea is a short video that students and teachers can watch that goes, this is the different types of teaching, this is what it looks like, this is what Blackboard or Moodle looks like, and so on. So that's the other thing we're going to produce. This is a couple of screenshots. So Jill's gonna, we've got videos of me and Jill lecturing in various different guises, and I think as part of the cluster what we're hoping is to try and open this out, so if anyone else would like to give us their recordings, so that we have, you know, imagine how amazing it would be to have a bank of recordings from all across the UK, loads of different styles, loads of different lecturers, loads of different subjects that people could use and see before they got to university. That's kind of what we're aiming for, but that's another bright idea that we've all had that we will get to once we've finished this bit. Yes, we also have some academic outputs. I've already mentioned the 10 sample rules paper, but we have a couple of chapters and a paper that will be coming out of the project as well, that we will add to that evidence base, hopefully by the end of the year, let's say, whenever. Okay.
What else are we doing, Emily?
I know. I'm like, oh. Right. So this is the point where it might all go wrong. I'm actually going to stop the recording now because we're about to go into the breakout rooms. How do I? Oh, I'm being sorry. I'm having issues. Stop recording. Yes, stop.